Okay, so again, we know the bicarbonate is decreased, PCO2 is decreased, and the pH is decreased. So using our rules, is the CO2 opposite of the pH? Nope. Is the bicarbonate the same as the pH? Yes. So it has to be metabolic acidosis. And the PCO2, it's abnormal, so it should be compensating for that metabolic component. And again, the pH, it's not back within the reference range, so it's only partially compensated. Okay, and so now why are these things happening? The pH is acidic because the kidneys, it's a metabolic problem, are secreting too much or they can't retain bicarbonate, which means they're losing base. So the bicarbonate's decreased and the pH is overly decreased. So the respiratory component is going to try and compensate by exhaling more, getting rid of an acid component, and trying to increase the pH back into this normal range. And so this usually can be seen in things like renal failure, um, lactic acidosis, diabetic ketoacidosis. Um, so these are some kind of things that can contribute to that. But remember, again, just kind of follow the rules, draw it out. We know what the primary problem is. Well, we can figure out what's going to be compensating. Uh, is it partial or complete? Well, it's still abnormal, so it's going to be partial. And then we can kind of, think about logically why this CO2 is the way it is. So we'll move on to the next one. Looking at our pH, 7.24, it's decreased. So we know it's acidosis. PCO2, 64, it's increased. Bicarb, 32, it's increased. All right, now so what's going on here? Well, remember respiratory CO2 goes opposite of pH, but metabolic is the same. pH is increased, PCO2 is, the pH is decreased, the PCO2 is increased. So we know it has to be respiratory acidosis. If the problem's respiratory, the body's going to try and compensate with the kidneys, and it's not, back in the normal range, so it's partially compensated. And I don't think I have any explanation here, but we can kind of think about it, take an educated guess. So if the pH is decreased and the PCO2 is increased, that means the body is, exhaling less. They're not getting rid of enough of that carbon dioxide, that acidic component, which is going to drive the pH down. It's going to make it acidic. And so the body is going to try and compensate with the kidneys by retaining more of the bicarbonate or that basic component and trying to increase that pH. So it is partially compensated in that way. Now we can move on to the next one. So we look at our pH, 7.46. Ooh, that's still elevated. PCO2, 46, still elevated. Bicarb, 31, elevated. And so we know our pH is up. That's alkalosis. Respiratory is opposite. Nope. Metabolic is same or equal. Yes. So metabolic alkalosis. If our problem is metabolic, the lungs are going to try and compensate. So this is abnormal. We're still not back within our reference range, so it's going to be partially compensated. And then kind of what's going on here? Well, if the bicarbonate's too high, we know the kidneys are retaining more bicarbonate base, which is going to drive the pH up. So the body's going to try and compensate. It's going to respond with the lungs by, let me think here. It's going to try and respond by exhaling less and increasing that partial pressure of CO2, going to retain more carbon dioxide and try and drive that pH down just a little bit. And so you can kind of see it gets a little tricky sometimes, but just always kind of draw back to these tables over here. You can kind of work it out, on paper in your head, whatever makes it easiest for you. And then so for, I guess, our last problem that we'll go over, they'll sort of hit us just with sort of like a case study, essentially. A patient is seen in the ER with severe diarrhea. Okay. Well, the ABG measurements at admission are, they give us the pH, PCO2, HCO3, just go through it, make it easy. 1, 2, 3. pH, 7.28. It's decreased. So we know it's acidosis. PCO2, 23. That's decreased. HCO3, 14. That's pretty decreased. So what's the problem here? Well, respiratory is opposite. No. Metabolic is equal. Yes, so it has to be metabolic acidosis. If the problem is metabolic, the body is going to try and compensate with the lungs. That's abnormal, so compensation is happening, but it's still out of whack. So we know it's only partially compensated if it is compensating at all. So that's kind of, we can already knock that out. And then they give us another portion of the problem. Well, later that night, the ABG measurements are performed again, Okay, well, just go through it. 7.33, still decreased. PCO2, 33, still decreased, but a little better. Bicarbonate, 17, still decreased, but higher than it was. So we're still in metabolic acidosis, and we're partially compensated still because our pH isn't back to normal, but we're still not there yet. It is better than before, however, so something's going on. And then they'll kind of probably hit us with these questions, at admission, the patient in acidosis or alkalosis. Well, we figured that out. It was pretty easy. It was acidosis. At admission, was the patient in metabolic or respiratory condition? Well, that's pretty easy. Metabolic. And so what is the body doing in the second measurements? Well, we know from our diagram the body has only partially compensated. Because this is metabolic, the primary compensation will be with the lungs via hyperventilation. Now, why is that? Well, the body is going to try and blow off this carbon dioxide, the acidic component, decrease it, and then raise the pH as a result. Technically, the body should try to keep the PCO2 lower than 35. And so we still see this, that, that's good. 33, it's closer to 35, but it's still lower. That's kind of what we would expect. Now the kidneys, you remember their kidneys are slow. So, okay. The kidneys will begin secondary compensation by retaining bicarbonate, but it will be slow. And so, we see that they're trying to increase this level of bicarbonate. It's happening, but it still isn't there yet. So it's about to cut off. I hope that's helpful. Email me if you have any questions and kind of review it if not.